At first glance, we seem like a normal American couple, but the truth is much darker than that. So we met while I was in prison. Well, kind of. Um, so back in 2019, I was in prison for 17 years at that point, and I submitted a petition for clemency, essentially a petition saying to the governor, like, I've served a significant part of my sentence, like, I'm asking for consideration or mercy. And you were doing a story on the abolition of parole.
Right. So Virginia got rid of parole in 1995. And I wanted to see what the impact of that was for people who had done everything right while behind bars and maybe had gotten an excessive sentence. So I was looking for somebody who I could talk to who was in the process of, living through no parole. And I came across his Facebook page that his mom maintained. And I thought, this guy seems like he'd be a great source for my story.
So I think you reached out to my mom first, and she said, "Oh, this lady wants to interview you." And I remember being nervous because there's this real kind of like partisanship in news, or like at different stations. Like some people are very much on this side or that side. So I reached out to everybody I knew, and I was like, "Hey, what can you guys tell me about like Courtney Stewart?" And everybody loved this woman. Like everybody said, "Oh, she's wonderful," or our sons played soccer together, or just all these connections. And everybody said she's a great person. You should talk to her, like no matter what the topic. So that made me feel comfortable. So then when she reached out directly, we set up a phone call. And we had, I think, 2 phone calls recorded for the interview. And so, we'd never seen each other. I'd seen her on TV. Like, I knew she was like a TV star, and that was about it. But we didn't really know anything about each other.
Yeah. Star is an exaggeration.
I disagree.
So we did those couple of phone interviews, and, I wanted to see both sides of the issue. I wasn't advocating for his release necessarily. I was just trying to sort of shine a light on the issue. And then the stories were over, and he continued to reach out to me through the prison email and sometimes phone calls, telling me other things that were happening, connecting me with people who were also hoping to get some kind of coverage. And so we were in regular contact. I mean, he was calling or emailing pretty frequently. Well, I was starting to joke about it. I was like, this guy has a lot of story ideas.
Well, and part of it was, the biggest thing about prison is feeling cut off and unheard and unseen. And there are some really unjust things that happen in prison. There's some really abusive things that happen. And when nobody's willing to listen to that, it feels even more frustrating or even more powerless. So having somebody who says, "Hey, I think that's a great story. Let's get it on the news. Like, I think that's great. People need to know about this." Or, "I think that's terrible. We need to bring it to light." It felt empowering. It felt like we were real human beings who had the right to our feelings and our struggles and whatever was going on. And I just really appreciated that relationship. And I did. I reached out every time something happened because she was willing to listen to us and treat us as human beings. And that was just something that I can't describe.
And then the pandemic hit and things got much worse for everybody, but especially for people who were incarcerated. Things were happening. There were transfers that weren't supposed to be taking place. There were just all kinds of sort of nightmares, outbreaks, inmates dying. So I was doing a series of stories on those sort of topics, not just about the prison where you were at that point. And then I left the TV station.
Yeah, and so then after that, I asked her, I was like, "Hey, like, I know you're not at the TV station anymore, but like, can I keep calling you? Either, you can connect me with somebody else, or like, I just like talking to you." And she said, "Yeah, that's fine. That's okay." But it was still very kind of like professional. And then I remember calling one night and just hearing, as soon as she answered the phone, like I heard it in her voice, something was wrong. And we didn't know each other that well, but there was just something that just really stuck out. And I said, "Hey, Courtney, what's going on? Like, are you okay?" And she said, "Well, I've got something going on, but I don't know whether I should tell you, because if I do, like, I can never be your reporter again. Like, I can't report on you. Like, if we're friends, like, I can't be objective." And I said, "There are a million reporters in the world. Like, I want to be a friend. Like, how can I help? Like, what's going on?"
So I was going through some stuff with parenting issues, and it really seemed in my mind at that call, I was in the middle of a really intense moment, and I thought, oh my God, this guy probably has the perspective that I would love to hear. But again, we've kept this boundary of personal and professional, and I hadn't been sharing anything about my life. And so, yeah, I said that to him, and then I was like, I'm just going to go for it, because I'm not at the TV station. I'm doing a podcast. There's no foreseeable way I will be reporting on him again. And so, yeah, I did. I sort of let him in on some personal stuff in my life, and he was really helpful. And then at that point, we became friends.
Yeah. So I would reach out, but it wasn't necessarily for news stories. Sometimes it was. mostly it was just about, kind of human connection and checking in and having somebody to talk to. And then I really freaked out. So in the middle of the pandemic, I had worked, it took me 12 years of like perfect behavior and keeping a job and doing thing to get to the honor pod at Buckingham. And I was in the single cell for a year, and it was just great. I was teaching. Even during the pandemic, they were calling me out to work or to make videos that were shown statewide. Like, I had, as best as you can in prison, a really good life. And they called me up and told me to pack my stuff, that I was getting transferred to a dormitory. And this is in the middle of the pandemic, where during the first outbreak, we had 4 guys die. Like, it was just terrifying. Like, you're going to take me from where I'm relatively safe and just shove me into a dormitory with 81 other people. Like, this doesn't seem like a good idea. And so I called freaking out, and she said, well, look, and she called around and tried to do something, but there was really nothing she could do. I mean, it was just the DOC deciding they had to do this. But what she did was she told me something that shifted my perspective. And she said, I try to look at life as a story, or a series of stories. And like, you both get to write that story, but you also get to kind of perceive it that way. Like, you get to choose how the narrative is. Is this a tragedy? Is this a comedy? Is this something that's like, educational or going to teach us? And that shifted in my mind, because I was struggling, like being in that dormitory, not being able to sleep, like all the PTSD stuff, all the drunken madness, like all of the insanity. I really struggled, and she helped me kind of reshape that as, okay, I get to write this story. Like, I get to figure out a way to tell this story that makes sense. And that gave me a great sense of kind of peace and understanding and a different perspective that allowed me to get through a situation that I was really struggling with.
Yeah, and then we were, talking pretty regularly. So this is like, that was in October of 2020. Yeah. And then I think at that point you were also in a relationship.
I was actually.
And so I don't know that I've never told this, I don't think, in a video. So there was this point, we were talking, we were friends, and then I don't know, sometime like right after Christmas, he emails and he says, I haven't told you about this relationship. And I was like, I wasn't happy. And I was like, what's happening? Like, I can't, why am I having this, like, twinge? But I waited like a week, and I wrote back, and I was like, I'm really happy for you. I want to hear about it. And that's great. And he was like, yeah, we broke up. So I was like, oh, okay. And then, but I was still thinking, like, what is, like, in my mind, I couldn't figure out like what was happening, because he had 10 years left on his sentence. I had not entered into any part of our connection with the idea that it was going to be romantic. And then I had a couple of other things happen, sort of dramatic, crises in my personal life. And one of them coincided with you getting notice that your clemency petition had been moved up, or it was being reviewed. So there was actually, from this like far off chance maybe his clemency would be reviewed, suddenly it was under active review, and there was a chance really that he was going to get out. And something about those things coinciding, sort of the intensity of it, elevated our relationship into something more intense, although still not romantic.
No, it was just, she went through a crisis, and my thing was, look, like, let me check on you every day, because I see you're really good at taking care of everybody else. And yeah, you're really resilient, but like, we all need somebody to check on us. We all need somebody to listen to us, to be there with us. So I said, so let me check on you for 5 minutes every morning before you go on your day. And she said, yeah, I think that'd be great. And so I called the first morning, and it was like 5 minutes of crying, and it wasn't really great, but it was, knowing that she had somebody there to listen. And then it was 10 minutes, and then it was 20 minutes. And then by the end of the week, or the end of 2 weeks, it was
and then it got really extreme.
2 hours a morning, and we were going to do a podcast together, and we were laughing. And like, these tragedies had really kind of turned into something that we could talk about and find the humor in, rather than be crushed by.
Yeah. And those, I don't think, that's not, ultimately those things were sort of the portal to the connection, but they aren't the foundation of the connection. Yeah. It was sort of like, that's what made me look at you. Like, we would not have intersected in that way otherwise. So all of a sudden we are connected, and we have this common experience that's brought us together. And then it was everything else, sense of humor, sort of
kind of common interest and common experiences and
life view and everything. Yeah. And endless conversations about anything. Like, we could talk, sometimes we were like, I don't know if 2 hours is enough this morning. It just went on and on and on.
She called it a data dump, that we were like downloading all the stories from our lives and the perspectives and the experiences. And it really was. It was like getting to know somebody in the most deep and intimate way possible, because there was no distraction. It was just pure kind of interaction and listening and sharing. It was really amazing.
Yeah.
And then after a month, she decided to be so forward as to say, I'm in love with you, and I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, that was really weird. It had dawned on me during that month. You know, I was like, I just was really certain, and I'm somebody who doesn't experience absolute certainty. I'm always kind of in the gray, and I'm like, well, this or this, and so to have this kind of like, I kind of assumed that he had some kind of feelings for me, but I didn't know what it was. But I knew how I felt, and it was like, well, I'm just going to tell him because that's just what the truth is, and it doesn't really matter if he says it back. It's like I'm just going to tell him because that was the kind of connection we had, was just really authentic, honest communication, and I had never done that before, and like it really took me by surprise that I felt that strongly and that I was that clear on like I'm just going to tell him. So I did.
Yeah. And I mean, I definitely had those feelings. I was worried. I was like, I don't think you know what you're getting into. And like, you can't let your feelings and your like emotions run away with this, because I have 10 years left in prison. And like, you are wildly successful and able and like turning down guys left and right. Like, I think you may just be in like some weird, like, I thought you were like
Oh, it was
hypnotized.
weird. I was a little bit hypnotized.
And I just wanted to make sure it was fair to her, because it's really easy to say, oh, this is great. Like this. No, but I mean, I felt really selfish in that situation, but we made, some kind of commitments. We were like, okay, we're not going to do this based on the future. We're going to be right here, right now. And like, if there's enough in this interaction that satisfies us or that is meaningful to us, like that's what we're going to focus on. We're not just going to talk about the future, just talk about how things could be or would be. We're going to stay present. And by doing that, we actually built an amazing relationship. Like what we had before I got out of prison was really special.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I was so used to being single that I think in a weird way, it was like, it might have been what allowed me to get into a relationship, because I really had not been in a serious relationship for close to 20 years. Like the entire time I dated people, and but I was raising kids, a lot of it on my own. I was really working on my career. I lived by myself. I just had my kids as my only roommates that I'd ever had. And so this was like this way to allow that side of myself and to sort of grow in a way that didn't feel threatening or like claustrophobic or crowding. And so there was something really amazing about it. And yeah, but we had never met because the prisons were closed down. The pandemic had shut off all visitation. So I had seen a couple of pictures. You had seen me on TV, but I hadn't been on TV at that point in like a year. And so yeah, then we did a couple of video visits, but the prison video visits are not they're not a high quality viewing experience. Or listening. I mean, it's really a grainy connection, a horrible angle for him with like fluorescent lights shining down and like a camera shining up, and it was hard to tell. Like every once in a while I'd be like, I think you're either really weird looking or you're really attractive, and I don't know which one it is.
When it was, we had been so excited to have this video visit, and I think we both left being kind of like traumatized and shook, be like, oh my God, like, is this really? And I felt bad about that, but finally I was like, can we talk about that? And you were like, it was horrible. And it was, okay, cool, we can be honest about that. And that was really one of our things going forward. We have to be honest and be willing to talk about everything, about the things we like, the things we don't like, what we feel comfortable with, what we don't. So as we talked about that and as we developed this, like we set boundaries. We talked about consent. We talked about what we wanted. And like one of the things we said is like, as awkward as that was in the video visit, like if we ever meet in person, we have to just do this. Like we have to just dive in, because if we just allow ourselves to like step back and get caught in the intellectual or like the abstract, like this is not going to work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is true. I mean, and that was that. I'm not recommending that for everybody or saying that was right or wrong, but we did sort of mutually decide that no matter what, when we met in person, we were just gonna like full steam ahead with whatever physical interaction we were gonna have. I mean, he'd been in prison for 19 years, and that was something he'd been thinking about a little bit. and then I thought, like it is one of those things. If you overthink it, if you make it like too much of like I don't know, it could just become surreal and too much. And it was surreal as it happened. But
well, and the other thing that really benefited us was that we had kind of reverse catfished each other. Like she said, oh, the pandemic has been nice to me. Like you haven't seen me on TV. Like I'm doing really rough. And so I was like, man, like I'm kind of scared. Like this is this might be rough. Like, and I'd never seen her in person. I didn't know how tall she was. Like, we had talked about that, but I didn't have that like sense of space.
And I'm very short.
Yeah. And same thing. I had told her like the worst parts of myself. Like I had a really bad tooth that, because we couldn't get dental care. Like there were all these things happening. And so I told her the worst part of myself, and we finally met each other in person. It was like, damn, like it's a whole lot better than I was,
Yeah, it was.
But yeah, so it was this bizarre thing where, like I said, we didn't know. And she used to joke. She said, whenever we meet, it's just going to all happen. Just out of the blue, like no warning. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. So on August 16th of last year, 2021, I got up and I heard that somebody had made clemency that morning. So he had been released at like 7 in the morning. There were news vans. It was this big thing. And I remember thinking like, wow, like one day that could be me. Like one day I could have that experience. That would be really amazing. And it was kind of like boosting. Like sometimes those things would happen and I would be like jealous or I would, just feel, but for the most part, anytime I saw something good happen to somebody else, I could be happy for them, both because I recognized it was a chance that could happen for me, but also just because I wanted good people to not be in prison anymore. Like people who had turned their lives around. So went about the day and like went to work and did things and I worked out. I actually wanted to call her again. So I was going to skip rec. And so I did burpees in the dorm. And then as I was going up to get on the phone, she didn't answer. I was like, oh, well, that's weird. And the counselor's like hurriedly like calling me into the office. And she's like, you gotta come here. And I was scared though, because, when I lost my dad, they call you to the watch officer. In that case, I was actually down in the hole. Like they give you bad news when they call you into the office and are like, hey, we're sorry, but this happened. But when I walked into the office, there was the speakerphone, and the woman on the speakerphone said, Mr. Crossan, are you sitting down? I said, no, why? And that's like, you don't want to hear, oh my God, your mother's dead, you need to sit down. But instead it was, well, because you're leaving Coffeewood today, you've been granted a pardon. And it was like hit a knee and like tearing up and like not knowing and at the same time not believing, because like this must be a mistake, or like there's no way this is going to work out, or they're going to change their mind, or some insane thing. But then it was like, well, if I am, I got to go call Courtney. So I ran out and like kind of got on the phone and was like, hey, and she didn't answer again. So then I was like, well, I guess I got to take a shower. Like I'm kind of sweaty. I just did burpees. And like, if we're actually meeting, I probably shouldn't smell like an ox. And you had your whole experience finding out.
Yeah. So I was actually at the TV station where I had worked. I was going to be doing some freelance coverage of the trial. And so I was just meeting with them about that. And then I had another meeting right after. And so I heard my phone going. But I couldn't answer because I was in this meeting. And when I got out, like 30 minutes later, I looked and I saw that it was Jesse's mom and Jesse. I mean, actually, I think I'd seen your mom was one of the callers, and she had tried to reach me that morning because she wanted to know, she had saw, and I was like, I need to call her back. But when I went out and saw that it was both her and him, like 5 times, plus a text from her saying, I'm on my way to the prison, he's getting out. I think at that point it was like, he'll be out in an hour, but that was like 30 minutes after she had sent it. So it was like 30 minutes. I was like, he's going to be out in 30 minutes. And I was 45 minutes away. So I jumped in the car and started driving towards the prison like a crazy person. Yeah.
So, it was an hour and a half between when they told me and when I walked out the gate. I had to like go do my property and sign paperwork and do stuff. And I walk out the gate and I'm like, my mom is right here. And I hadn't seen her for a year and a half because of COVID. Like I hadn't been able to give my mom a hug. So I have to like sit here and do paperwork. And I go over there and I give her a big hug and I'm like, oh, Mom. And she's like, let's get the F out of here, as I'm like holding her up in the air. And I was like, okay, that's a good idea. Let's go. Like they might change their mind. So we walk out and I like get into a car for the first time in 20 years, which is like bizarre, and looking around. And then we drive out to the end of the road and she gives me her phone and she's like, here, call Courtney. So I call and I'm like, where are you? Like, she's like, I don't know where I am. Like, I'm coming. And so like, you can just hear the insanity in her voice. So we decide to pull into the driveway right next to the prison driveway. It's like a driveway for a farm. So we're just this little driveway right next to a cornfield. And so I'm trying to like talk to my mom, but like, I don't know what to talk about. I'm in shock. I just got out of prison and I'm both like excited and kind of nervous. I'm like, well, what about this woman? Like we think we're in love, but like, what if she gets here and we can't stand each other? What if we think each other smells like fish, or like we have no idea what to expect? Mm-hmm. And then 15 minutes or 10 minutes later, like this car pulls up behind and I look and there's Courtney, and she's effing amazing. Like she is beautiful and she is short and she's just incredibly attractive. And it was the most mind-boggling experience in my life. And then I did the meanest thing I've ever done in my life. My mom had waited 19 years to get me out of prison. And I said, Mom, I love you, but Courtney and I have to go take care of something. She said, oh, I'm sure you do. But it still had to like tear her apart. So then Courtney and I are driving down the road. Like she is gripping the steering wheel, like shaking, like not knowing what's going on. I think you kept like hitting the blinker or like the windshield wiper, because it was this surreal moment.
Emitting shrieks. I was like, ah! Ah!
because this came out of nowhere. Like nobody had any understanding. And then we were able to connect and have an absolutely amazing experience and then go on about our relationship with the same kind of intentionality and focus and honesty and the willingness to have like really difficult conversations and really uncomfortable situations and be there and hold space no matter what was happening.
Yeah, I think that's the most profound thing for me. And it's not, I mean, I think somebody commented under one of your videos saying, oh, it's all perfect. No, it's not all perfect. But what it is really honest and really good. And when we do, and we don't have huge fights, but we have had like moments of tension or irritation or, maybe a slight misunderstanding or whatever. And it's like, I think we're both coming to this, like trying to look at what our own parts and things are, how to communicate honestly, how to not let something sort of fester and just like, yeah, maybe you have a flare of irritation, but like pretty soon after that, you can see the situation more objectively. And we have just been sort of navigating those things as they come up. And so that's really been kind of amazing, like the best communication I've ever had. And not just in romantic, it's just really, really nice to be able to be so open.
It's been unbelievable. And it works. Like it's really and truly working. But like she said, it's not perfect. It's two imperfect people showing up day after day and doing the best we can. And sometimes that is really good. Sometimes it's not great. But we keep showing up and we have that dedication. And that's what's allowed us to actually have a relationship that works.
Yeah. And yeah, we're 9 months into the real
in-person
version, but like way over a year into the so I mean it is still relatively new, but I feel like the patterns and sort of the process is already really good. So if we can stay intentional.
Yeah. All right, thank you for listening.